Anyway, are Gen Z bad at arguing? Well, some schools and universities are now teaching young people how to disagree respectfully. Classes will encourage students to actively listen to others and avoid argumentative responses in an effort to promote free speech and prevent conversations around controversial subjects simply being shut down. To discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome Samantha Price, head teacher at Benenden School in Kent. Thank you for joining me today. So, Samantha Price, can you tell me a little bit about why it is that there is a perception that younger people find it difficult to disagree politely?
I think young people have always found disagreeing challenging, and I certainly remember back to my own teenage years when I had sort of very strong convictions about things, and finding the right words or the right way to disagree was a challenge. I think with the generation that we're working with now, what makes it so complicated is that they have every possible access to being able to communicate very, very instantaneously, particularly across social media. So if they've got a thought, they can get it out there quickly into sort of a black hole on social media platforms. If they see something that they don't like, they can have immediate response, and there's no real accountability to that. So it's very easy for them to be able to just form an opinion based on very little knowledge and just be able to react very quickly indeed. And of course, I think that makes it hard for them to really get their point across, but actually to be able to make progress with that as well.
Now, I know I used to be a teacher myself, so I know a lot of school teachers, and they tell me that things are getting worse. And there is a sense in which there are just certain opinions that young people will not accept. But of course, young people haven't been able to formulate those opinions themselves. They must be getting that from somewhere. Isn't it really a problem of older people imposing values onto the young?
Well, I think, again, social media, I'm afraid, is predominantly to blame for this, albeit social media can also be incredibly informative. And having sort of experienced lockdown, for many of young people being literally locked in their houses for months on end, social media platforms were the only way in which they could sort of have access to the external world and various views. And we all know that 2 years ago, when we were locked down, there were a lot of very contentious issues which came out. And of course, those are the issues which were very pertinent to this generation, and they wanted to have their voice heard. I think the real challenge for them, as you say, is that they've got to have enough information to be able to substantiate what their response actually is. And too quickly, they just sort of ride on an emotional response without being able to actually sort of argue it and effectively listen to what differing views might be. And from our point of view as educators and working with young people in schools, now that we've got them properly back in, I think we've got a lot of work to do to be able to challenge the good intentions, the genuinely good intentions that they've got in terms of wanting to really advocate for real equality in society and, of course, climate change and so many other issues. But until they learn to effectively listen to each other and listen to opposing views, they're not going to be in a position, I don't think, to be able to make a real difference. And that's a difference I think they actually can make as they grow into adulthood.
Do you think a lot of it is also to do with popularity, young people not wanting to say the thing that other people don't agree with? I mean, how do pupils at your school who sort of dare to disagree with the consensus, how do they get on? Do they feel intimidated by that?
I think generally young people, they form an opinion through social media, through what their friends say and other influencers. And I think at the time when they are reacting to that, they genuinely believe that that is their opinion. I don't think that they feel that they are frightened to be able to say what they really think, because I think the problem is with social media, everything happens so quickly. You almost don't have time to be able to sit back and to reflect on what it is you truly believe in. So I think that's the real issue. And of course, when the students are in school, you've got that time. And I think as educators, we need to create that time in our timetables to enable them to be able to do that, so that they're not quite so reactive.
Can I ask how, on a practical level, how you are going about achieving that in the school?
So one of the things that we did to launch this academic year, which was something that I started to work on with the Girls' Schools Association when I was president last year, was to spend a day with our upper sixth pupils, just all year 13, just focusing on this topic of disagreeing well. And we invited other schools to come into our school. And we worked on this in collaboration with students from UCL, so they're ambassadors for exactly what it is that we are trying to achieve. And what was fantastic about having UCL there was that you've got young people in their early 20s, and they were running workshops with our students and the other students who came in from other schools. And their influence and them sitting down with our 18-year-olds and explaining to them the importance of being able to listen with empathy, with being able to step back and to think about the words that you're using was incredibly powerful. In many ways, it was much more powerful than teachers actually taking the lead on this. So that was the focus of the day. We also had Michelle Hussein, who came and or spoke to us remotely, really about how she challenges sort of key figureheads and politicians on radio, and she's always looking for the light rather than the sort of the dark side of an argument. So the way she questions is to manage the truth, but always looking for a way forward in those debates. And that was a really powerful message that she gave the students, is that it's right to have an opinion. We want you to have opinions. We recognise that everybody's going to disagree. And actually that's healthy too, or else we can't move society forwards. But in disagreeing, we've got to find a way through. And of course, that light is that way through. What I was really delighted about at the end of that day was that we had so many students from other schools as well as my own saying that was one of the best days that they can remember, particularly when they've sort of taken time out of lessons to focus on that topic. And what's been interesting around school is that with them being the top year group, they use that term now regularly. We've got to disagree well, and that filters down through the rest of the school. But I mean, through our PSHE programme, we've also put a lot of focus on this too.
But it's not just about being polite, though, is it, and arguing well? It's also about analysing your own thought process and acknowledging that all of us are likely to be wrong about a lot of things. I mean, isn't part of the problem here that critical thinking isn't really being developed sufficiently in schools?
Yeah, and I think critical thinking there used to be a critical thinking A-level actually, which went by the way a number of years ago now, and critical thinking therefore has to be taught through the curriculum, across the curriculum, with a specific focus in some of your co-curricular sort of academic and non-academic subjects that you teach. And I would very, very strongly advocate that is something that all schools need to be really focusing on. And in being sort of critical in your thinking, you also need to be critical in how you listen to people, and you need to actively listen to people, not just listen to what it is that you want to hear. And you've got to be able to breathe and pause before you then sort of form your own argument. One of the exercises that the UCL ambassadors ran was actually that they got the students to look in each other's eyes. A lot of them hadn't met before because it was different schools. They had to look in each other's eyes for a minute, which is a really, really difficult thing to do at the best of times. And they couldn't speak to each other at all. They just had to sort of make a connection with that person. And what was interesting is once you make a connection with anybody and you actually look at them, then actually that takes the sting out of a sort of different views that you both might have, because there's a human connection. And the problem, of course, with social media is there is no human connection. So the students found that really fascinating. And then they had to listen to opposing views of each other, and they had to listen for a minute again without interrupting. Now, when you feel passionately about something, listening to someone else with a different view for a minute is actually a very difficult thing to do. But what was interesting is that as they listened for a minute, that also gave them a minute to begin to sort of gather their own thoughts. So what you get is a slightly sort of less emotional response, and you get something that is more thought through. Of course, This takes time, and it's something we've got to do with young people to write their way through school.
Well, I think everything you're doing there sounds absolutely wonderful. Good luck with it. Thank you for joining us, Samantha Price.
Thank you.